going to call the meeting to order. And would you have a roll call, please?
Oh, I don't know when we do that. That's brand new.
Well, typically when I run the probable cause panel for the Board of Architecture, we have a roll call to see if we're here.
Normally the chair does that and then each person introduces themselves to the meetings that I
Okay,
attend.
I'll do it that way then. Mr. Wiggins, would you mind telling us who you are?
Joe Wiggins, Wiggins Construction. I am the Division I contractor for the board.
Yeah.
Kenneth Vogel, Essential Electric, Division II contractor.
Okay. I'm Wendell Hall, I'm an architect.
And I'm Leslie Davidson. I'm a civil structural engineer and real estate broker.
Very good. Now, tell us what we have to do today, Steve.
Okay, our agenda items today, the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. We had no quorum, so we had a general discussion, and that was kind of the end of that. So I believe we need to vote to approve these minutes.
All right, is there, I propose we approve these minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay.
And we've got a copy here for you to sign before.
All right.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion of licensing. So the state of Florida, so if you look at the Florida statute sheet here, the state of Florida is moving to expand the licensing opportunities for people moving into the state. These are examples from the Building Code Administrators and Inspectors Board. There are provisions in the contractor licensing as well that do this. What this basically does is somebody coming in from out of state that has had a license in that category for a period of time would be exempt from the competency exam. This is proposing this to see if this is something that you have an appetite for. It's going to take, or we would have to adopt an ordinance and add it into our current rules for licensure. And in this, we could set this board could set the parameters of that too. What you would want for a requisite experience requirement. And again, this is if you have an appetite for this at all. The state seems to have been leaning in this direction. There was a bill in this past session that died in committee for an unrelated industry, but they were looking at the endorsement thing. That died in committee, but this was an odd session too, because they were also debating eliminating all licensing boards across the board for everybody, architects, engineers, contractors, inspectors. They decided that some people thought the DBPR could do that better and cheaper than volunteer boards. The folks at the DBPR,
I've talked to those guys, no, they can't do that.
that's what the DBPR says as well. So that one went away too. But so there's something, and again, if you need to consider a little bit, think on what kind of parameters you would want, or if this is something you would even want to do. We can kind of spell out what the rules, what the parameters, what the experience requirements you would want somebody to bring, and write that into the ordinance.
Okay, let's open that up for discussion, then if anybody want to talk about it.
I'll start. So you're talking about registered contractors, right? So they're licensed with the county individually, correct?
They would be.
They would be,
This-
right.
This endorsement part is basically somebody coming in from out of state
Right.
that's been doing that in another state.
Okay.
It would also apply, would it not, to if they come from another area of the state and move here?
We currently have reciprocity agreements
For
with
the state.
across the state, correct. So if someone comes in, even the local jurisdictions, that's a lot easier, but someone comes in from, say, Southwest Florida, as long as their test score requirement is at the same as ours, that's 75%, then we'll accept the reciprocity from that particular jurisdiction as well.
All right.
Is that a project-based thing, or is that they get a license for Clay County right away?
They would get a license for Clay County.
Okay.
In whatever that category,
Right,
be it a roofer, electrician, general contractor, residential guy,
okay.
whatever that.
Just real quick, I did some research on reciprocity for the state, right? Right now, it's just like Louisiana, North Carolina, Mississippi. Does anybody know anything different than that? Or, okay. So, based on the limited reciprocity for out-of-state stuff, I feel more comfortable following the state's lead on that. I would kind of like just hold back and see what the state decides to do at the next session.
What's your reservations is concerned?
I think it could get too out of hand if counties are kind of making their own decisions on that. I'd rather follow the state. I mean, our state has pretty good licensing requirements, right? And so I want to make sure that that is upheld.
Okay. All right. You have any opinion?
So that's, the way I read it was they're coming into our state, not leaving our state.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct, Jerry. But I just wanted to establish that we don't, Florida doesn't reach out to other states or hasn't been accepted by other states, right?
Correct.
I just wanted to put that on the record.
I've seen it a lot of different ways. So for me, starting out, I was registered and figured I'd only be in this area. Why go any further? And then, of course, now I'm working down south, and so I have to do reciprocity through all these. So what I'm waiting for, selfishly, is just to grandfather in. If it doesn't come to that, then I'll just do state tests and go. So I know that aspect as far as reciprocity for the state. I also know, because we had a conversation earlier about if I go to a different state, Florida doesn't play well with those other states. And so do we want to limit those who come in and basically protect our own work? Or do we want to try to open it up and see what that looks like? So I do agree with you, follow the state's guidelines. But a lot of times the state says, I don't really care, county, do whatever you want to do. And so then I would look to see, okay, what is St. John doing? What is Duval doing? Where are they going with this? As it reads right now, I mean, it says if they're at least 18 years of age. Well,
If you flip that over, the second page on this is the administrative code. On the back of that page is what deals specifically with the reciprocity. So it's spelled out, what you've got to bring to the table.
2 years of a license.
Yeah, it was 10 years, and it has to be active. And again, this is the inspector board. Okay?
Right.
So you would, if you had had the license for 10 years, and it had to be active within the last 2 years. So if you were a building code administrator in the 70s, you don't get to count that.
Right.
If you haven't been doing it all along. So that's kind of the parameters, and they have expanded it on this particular board. They've expanded it to because there are many states that don't license that individual. That board can look at equivalent training, testing, that sort of thing. So somebody that's been, California is a prime example of that. They don't license their people individually, but they do have an experience requirement for you to be able to accept that position. So you have the same test that Florida would administer through the International Code Council, and that experience requirement to get that job, and then the time on the job that this particular board will look at to see about moving licensing forward from somebody. So California's been one of those that's been fairly regularly accepted. There are some of the other Midwest states that have similar, though they don't license those individuals, they do have similar experience requirements before you can actually get that job.
And they have to test out.
Yes.
Yeah. Which,
And again, affidavits are required on that.
right, I mean, I'm good either way. I like the test because our codes are gonna be different. There will be some similarities, but just as far as electrical is concerned, obviously there's a national electrical code. But our installation requirements are gonna be different than California, different than Midwest, and so, what is that? It's easy to say that you have the experience. It's easy to get the affidavits. It's easy to just create experience. And so I would like to second that up with some sort of testing.
Okay, that's good.
I do have a comment too. Regarding the trades and the electric with the national code, the ICC is pretty much the base of national building codes in America now. And a lot of the work that these registered contractors would do are permit required work, so you have a second level there. So it's kind of like a secondary check on the work. So I'm kind of leaning toward if they have 10 years of experience and they've been active within the last 2 years, then apply and we could give them reciprocity. And we can always take it on a case-by-case basis. If somebody doesn't pass the criteria, doesn't have the proper affidavits to prove work, we could go on a case-by-case.
Who evaluates this?
Can you guys make your mic hot, please? Just push the button and you get a green light.
I thought I was on.
I've got to push a button.
Yes, one right in front. There you go.
Who would be tasked with evaluating these applications?
They're still staff driven. And
Your staff?
Staff, correct.
Okay, I have questions. We have there's no statewide clearinghouse for licensure for the local county. Each county is totally independent.
Correct, correct.
Okay. When I got reciprocity in Colorado for architecture, I had to take a test, but it was on the rules specific for Colorado's practice of architecture. I know each county is different. Just because they had good experience elsewhere, there'll be some little tweaks that they should have to deal with in Clay County. I think it'd be wise to, no matter how we do reciprocity, there should be some kind of an evaluation process of their understanding of what is required in this county, since we are different from the others, in case we were to secede and choose to, move to Duval because the weather is better up there or something.
It's cooler up north.
Yeah, it seems like it today.
Do we have a test or a checklist of items that a candidate that wants to register in our county has to go through currently?
Yes. Currently, there are all of our license categories. I'll probably turn mine on too. All of our license categories mirror the state licenses. Several years ago, the state narrowed the local license categories that we could administer. So all of our for journeyman, master, those kind of things, and our experience requirements for our Division I contractors as well mirror the state requirements. And this endorsement thing is, we have nothing on it. So it's a blank slate at this point. So again, if it is something that you guys have some sort of an appetite for, we can put something together and create the parameters. If it's not something that we want to do, if we want to wait to see if the state starts to push this more, that this is, you guys tell me what to do on this one. I don't have a preference one way or another. We do have people that come in that have run a business for, we had one within the last 6 months, I guess. The man had been an electrical contractor and for 40 years. And so he had infinite number of business licenses, permits. It was glaringly obvious that the guy had been doing this for that window of time. And we, as staff, approved that application. We have some others that we're going to discuss in a little bit that that we have denied with people bringing in less than stellar experience requirements. And I'm going to propose those to you to see if that's still on you guys' thinking from a staff level, if we can still address those. But I don't really have a preference on this one way or another. It seemed like that was the way that the state was starting to push things. But again, that didn't come through in this last session. So it is entirely up to you guys what you want to do. I didn't want to put a whole lot of effort into it until I knew what you guys, and then we can start, if it's something you want to do, we can start trying to build it out. If not, we can wait and set on it. And again, that's
All right.
at your discretion.
I'm in favor of making it so that a person who comes from somewhere else wishes to follow their trade, that they are able to do so without a lot of silliness. It sounds like silliness because you dealt with other building officials, not this one, because these people are okay, but in other parts of this state, some of them are real idiots. And to deal with all of these issues is difficult, and I don't like to have others added to it. So I don't mind finding a path for a person to be licensed in this state, in this county, provided that we address the issues. Your concern is that we're going to get people that are disqualified or are just making things up. Is that what your concern was?
I am saying that it's a little harder now if you go straight to W-2s, but if you're just looking for affidavits, you can find experience out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether they pull a permit or not, that doesn't mean they're doing it correctly.
Okay, I understand. Yes, I've
So
seen that.
it's really more of a safety concern than anything.
Okay.
But I also agree with you, sometimes the hoops that we go through is frustrating.
Very frustrating and doesn't accomplish anything, in my opinion. But Joe, you were concerned of needing, agreeing with the idea of some type of examination, I believe. Is that correct?
Florida, our codes, I think, are one of the top in the nation. And so I just want to caution against, as you said, if we make it too easy, it could lead to issues down the road for our state.
It could.
And so that's why I would, rather than 67 counties doing 67 different things, I would rather follow, if the state looked at it this year, they're probably going to look at it next year. And I'm not sure if 6-8 months is going to make that big of a deal for us as a county to wait.
Well, the county has good judgment. We just had that one gentleman you mentioned had been doing this for 40 years, probably knew about what he was doing. It was obvious, and they made the choice.
Sure.
And they can also withhold the licensure if they question.
Understand, but I also don't want to put our staff in a situation they're having to, make that decision. When it's really easy to have 4 years experience, that's easy, right? But when you're on the line, who's to say, who's going to pull that trigger, yes, this guy's good and this guy isn't. That to me is a concern. And then we're a growing state, right? And then once it's known, hey, you can go to individual counties and start applying, right? Do we open the floodgates? And now we're adding something else for our staff to be doing.
Okay, I don't want to overload the staff. They usually have more than they need to do now.
Right. Even though they're going to go into a nice new office, I'm sure they can handle it. But no, I just don't know how many applicants are you going to get now?
I have to apologize.
Yes.
If someone comes in, obviously, to a different county, it's an easier county to get licensed. And the word on the street is, hey, we go to Hillsborough, whatever, right? And then they go, all right, now that I have a license in Florida, I'm gonna go to Clay. What does that look like?
We would, the letter of reciprocity that we get from that other jurisdiction has got to have, that they are in good standing in that jurisdiction, and it has to have their passing exam score. And we have had some local, some neighboring jurisdictions that had a 70 as opposed to a 75 for their passing score, and we have refused the reciprocity on that. If 70 is your requirement and you have a 80 on your score, we can take that. But it's an absolute requirement that we have the test score on the reciprocity request or letter that we get from that other jurisdiction. And we have denied them that were below our 75 passing
But
test
if
score.
they came from a different state and Hillsborough did not ask for a 75, but then we went to Clay,
That may be a different, that's a whole new wrinkle on the reciprocity agreement. Yes.
Do you want to reinforce anything you were saying?
I just wanted one point, when you said that the contractor might not be pulling permits, we're getting into unlicensed work there. That's another whole animal. That's, unpermitted, unlicensed work. That's a DBPR violation.
no, they can pull permits.
I specifically was one when you said if they're not pulling permits. So if they're not pulling permits, that's unlicensed work, and it's kind of outside of us anyway. That's more of a disciplinary.
I agree.
So.
Well, we've had people pull permits and they're not involved with the project.
That's correct. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, we do have that too.
And then it becomes a real mess.
But I think you would still have that scenario, because someone's going to come in and start working and get someone else to pull the permits for them. You still have that happening.
Yes.
It's the barrier to getting their own license is what's feeding that still. And I have also gotten endorsement in other states, and we had to take a local codes and laws test as well. Do we have anything on local Clay County stipulations for contractors?
Correct. That is one of the requirements, is you do have laws and rules, you do have the competency exam. The inspector's board as well, you come in with your 40 years of experience and your license, you're still going to take the state
test.
The Florida principles and practices is what is the way they refer to that. The laws and rules are different. You got to be able to pass that test.
Okay.
And if you can't pass that test, you don't need to be doing it. Learn to operate the fryer.
Does the board want to consider reviewing, continuing with the idea of reciprocity along the lines that the state seems to follow and wait until the state makes its move? Is that, most people seem to be wanting some exams, and your point is that it's possibly we should see what the state chooses to do and follow, because they're a higher standard of what we do.
That's the way I'm leaning.
Is anybody opposing that? Is anybody that's...
I think he made perfect sense in that we don't know in 6 to 8 months what the state actions may be. We may want to sit back and wait, as opposed to creating more work for the county right now that may change.
That's fine, I could support that.
If I can ask staff, does this delay, does it do anything to staff? No? Okay.
This was a big talking point and was kind of moving in that direction, and then it just completely flamed out this go round. But I think we'll see it again. So if my understanding that you want to kind of table this until we see what the state does, and if we get some movement specifically on contractor licensing is what I'll look at. Okay, not other industries, but see what they're doing with the contractors and how they're doing that. And if it looks like they're moving in that direction, then we can bring this and add the agenda item again in the future. If that works.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I say we take no action and wait.
All right. But that's not required for a motion item, but you guys, this is a discussion, a general discussion that we had. I think that's fine. If anybody is strongly opposed, you should say so, but otherwise, that's where we're headed. All right, what else do you have?
Okay, so we have some approved and denied licenses. We had one individual that was looking to be a journeyman electrical contractor, and he was having a little difficulty with W-2s and that sort of stuff, and he proceeded to have about 7 different letters of endorsement. And yes, the guy worked for me here, and finally got the one that he was trying to get, where he had 5 years working with the one contractor and had done some intensive training programs with him. So that was one that we struggled with for a little bit, getting some very clear time frame parameters. But when we finally got the one that he was trying to get, so he got approved. Okay. We had another that was trying to get a residential contractor license. And he had worked for 7, 8 years for a company that does the portable buildings. And this individual, as he's outlining the experience, was very good at obtaining the permits for these portable buildings. And that was kind of the breadth of the experience. Went out sometimes and looked at them setting the building on the site, and then was really good at getting the permits. And we went back to them, hey, we need a little more. Did you drive a nail in anything, ever, any of those kind of things? And we really couldn't make that bridge that gap. So that one we did deny, because there was no real construction experience in, it's great that you know how to compile paperwork, which is a challenge sometimes.
Were they local, Mr. Show?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, that's kind of, a broad brush of what we've had. But, as these things come in, if they can't actually demonstrate that they've been doing the work, there's been some level of hands-on work, or you're actually supervising what's happening, that we're not accepting those kind of applications. So, and again, and I bring these up to see if that is kind of consistent with where you guys are thinking. We'd be more restricted, less, any of those kind of things.
That makes sense, but you're not telling the guy no, you're telling him that you don't qualify at this point.
Correct.
He can go out and develop a job experience, work for a contractor, and get his requirements, and pursue it.
Right.
And that's the way all of us have gotten whatever it is we need, is that we got what was required and continue it. But it's important to do have barriers to people who are not qualified.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, yeah, he doesn't need to go build somebody's house.
I wouldn't think that's a good thing.
So-
He might get a permit.
Can I follow up? The journeyman that you did approve, right? I don't know the classification to say that now becomes a journeyman, but he still has to go work for an electrician, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, he has to work for a master.
Okay, so but during his application, does he tell you who he's going to work for? Is that?
No.
Okay.
No. I say no, it's not, that wasn't the requirement.
Right.
But he was working for, one of the other individuals that wrote him the letter to do that, and had been with him about 18 months.
Okay. So that was just for his journeyman's license.
Correct, correct. So he did have supervision, and he's not the guy doing the permit. He is the guy pulling the wire, but he's not obtaining the permits, and he's not ultimately the responsible party. So there is a level of
Sure.
protection and oversight from that. But he does his time as the journeyman, and he can sit for the master.
Which is, yeah, which is how it was.
Right.
I just know dealing with the construction trades board in Jacksonville, they went to W-2s. So let me see who you're working for.
We do get those. We do get those. We don't have the same affidavit that the state does. We are typically looking for some proof of employment or an employment letter from whoever you work for, something like that. But we don't have that same set affidavit that the state does.
You need military as well?
No, this isn't what. We have had that. We had, one application that the individual was looking to use his military experience. And that was about all he had. We had about 6 months working for a construction company. It was a military experience, and we looked at his military experience, and it was logistics. Okay, so, you know, if you're a CB, I'm good with you. But, yeah, you're.
What about trade school?
And he didn't have any trade school, didn't have any, he had 6 months with a construction company that he got with when he separated from service. So we did not approve his either. There were, his conversation, and some of his conversation with us is that the state would allow it. Okay, if you say so, then my suggestion was to go, you need to take your state exam, then you're gonna have to bother with it. I know that again, with the inspector board, we will look at that, but you need to be with a construction battalion, you know, for that to count as construction experience.
So just from my knowledge for Clay, you can't, in FCB 14, or anything with the CBE, I mean, military, relevant military, you guys do look at schooling, and then
Correct.
obviously work experience.
All right.
Okay. So there's no motion or anything on that either?
I don't think you need a motion.
Okay. Last item that we have is discipline policy. Because we had a little bit of discussion in the first meeting about kind of how we were doing that. That's the reason for the little piece of the ordinance. If you go to section 7-37, powers and duties. Okay, so this is kind of where the authority of the board lies. And this is kind of what we can do at this point. If we have a contractor that we need to bring before you for discipline, it would be, and that's the reason that we're recording the meetings, is that's a function of this board. And we have to be able to document the proceedings, should we have one of those. We don't currently have anybody that we have that kind of issue with. But this is kind of where, so if there was any appetite to expand that, I know there had been some discussion about some quasi judicial powers or something like that. All of those things are ordinance changes, those things we would have to take to the commission. And they would have to say yes, no, maybe. Anything, we don't have a budget. So anything that would require $1 is probably going to get a no, particularly in this particular budget climate that we're dealing with right now. But I don't want to speak for them, obviously. But that's a consideration as we look, if you want to try to expand the powers of the board or the authority of the board. Their fiscal implications of that are going to be something that the county commissioners are going to look at.
Steve, do
Yes.
you want to get their opinion on the finding of fact hearing, anything like that?
What does that mean?
Okay, so if we have brought up that if there's a circumstance that we need to, bring up, say, a private provider, okay? The private provider statute, discipline is administered by the board that governs that entity, okay? So to be a private provider, you can, an architect, an engineer, or a building official, one of those three, okay? So for building official, discipline goes to the building code administrator, inspector board, architects and engineers go to their respective boards. Historically, complaints have not gotten very far with the architect engineer. And the suggestion was made that if we were to bring someone here, I know you have an issue with being on probable cause, but were we to bring an engineer in and plead the case, and you found fault, this board could issue a finding of fact that, yes, this individual behaved outside the parameters of Florida Statute 553-791 and did these things, and we would actually, this board would have a finding of fact that could then be sent to the respective regulatory board. And in doing that, it carries a little bit more weight
It would.
than just the building officials mad at the private provider. So that may be something that would be another thing that we would bring before you outside of strictly the contractor license.
That would require another, like a number 7 instead of just 6. You have to add another phrase.
I'll get with legal on that and see if we need to make that amendment. Or if we need to put something in there about having something.
Maybe it's already in here. Yeah, okay. That's fine.
But that may be something that would need to, and it would be beneficial to us as staff as well. You know, we don't want to get out of bounds either. We all have the laws there and we have to obey all of them whether we like them or not.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing as well.
Okay, one thing, Steve, on this idea of this, it's helpful. We have the Board of Architecture on the probable cause panel. Occasionally, there's a building official who has issued information or is not finding a fact, as you might call it, like about an architect who has been doing something that has been really a problem. That adds a lot of weight to the accusation that's been gotten and placed.
Correct.
So that's always helpful.
There would be the county couldn't do anything except for this board could forward the finding of fact to the jurisdictional board, right?
Right.
You couldn't like suspend them for 30 days or from doing work, it's just.
No.
Okay.
No, we can't.
Can't do an architect or engineer.
Yeah. This board acts on locally licensed contractors. If we brought a certified contractor, brought a state contractor in, it would be a similar circumstance. That there would be we have a hearing here, there's a finding of fact
Right.
that Joe Bob the roofer didn't do anything he was supposed to and took the old lady's money. The board could issue that finding of fact, and then if the Clay County Building Department makes forwards that complaint to the licensing board, then we would include that, which is what we would do if we needed to have, try to administer some discipline on a state license contract. Because again, we're providing that to a different board and they have to act on it.
But you can't discipline registered contractors.
Correct.
Have you in the past?
Not for a very long time.
Okay.
The last minutes I read were that this one was in the 70s.
How do you currently handle complaints to architects, engineers, and building officials? Do you, someone on staff, compile the complaint and send it either to the Florida Board of Professional Engineers or the architects or building official?
We have not actually forwarded any of those on. We've had a good enough relationship with the people that we deal with that sit down and talk about it, quite frankly. And we're getting to the point that we may not be small enough to keep doing that. That's worked in the past, but there were a lot less people. And we're getting a lot of contractors that aren't from here and haven't been here and don't have the same mindset. And we are noticing it's a lot more adversarial than it used to be in a lot of circumstances. So this is something that's a very real circumstance that we may need to start doing this as we're trying to mature as a county and handle these things in a little more professional way. If we've got someone that's just not responsive to the conversation that we're having.
So taking it to the
We may
board
need
could
to
be
escalate.
an escalation without having to go to the state level.
Correct.
Could give you another kind of tool in your,
Yes, sir. Because in that case, we're gonna come up here and he gets to say what his problem is. We get to show what ours is, and then there's an independent body that's determining the correctness or incorrectness of what we've got. And so that's something that will probably start to happen as we continue to grow and continue to get more and more new people here. We're kind of on the cusp of that. And you can tell there is an attitude change a little bit from the public. So that's one of the reasons we kind of wanted to bring this up and that you guys know that here's some things that may happen or may be coming out a little bit.
All right. Good to know. I hate to see a change in the county, because this has always been a good county to work in.
It has been. And I prefer sitting down and having a conversation with somebody. I don't want to come up here and do that. I want to meet 4 times a year and go over some stuff and call it that. I want to bring, trial and testimony and all that kind of stuff is for the birds. I don't want to get there, but we may have to.
Yeah.
We may have to. Okay, and that's kind of the end of what I have on the agenda.
All right, is there anything else that anybody on the board wanted to bring up?
You're the chairman. Is there a vice chairman? Do we have that?
I think I'm vice.
You're vice chair. Okay, just clarifying.
I have a question. Does the county have an ombudsman or any kind of procedure for working out conflicts when you sit down with someone who isn't working?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no. The MO has been, you don't like what we say, you call the commissioner. That's kind of where that's been. But you call somebody, call Sharice and tell us. It's been kind of the way that's gone. But again, that goes with the growth and the maturing of the county, because you're going to get to a point that there's got to be some level of filter.
Yeah, City of Jacksonville, we had much more of a tiered response to handle contractors like that.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, yeah.
As it sits right now, even though it hasn't been done for a long time, the discipline, if you will, does that stay at the staff level? Or where is that? Were you alluding to adding it into the ordinance?
Right, we haven't, if I got a problem with something you got going on and we sit down, that's not really discipline.
Right.
That's, we, two grown
Sure.
men gonna sit there and talk about and work out the problem. Any level of discipline where you were gonna have a license suspension or a reprimand or any of those things that we were gonna have to send to the state would have to come through this board. Okay, this, the building department would be the complainant, but the board would be the one that would issue the discipline.
So currently, if you have a problem with a contractor, you can't suspend their permit pulling abilities or anything, or?
Absolutely not. We, that's specifically in the statute, that if their license is current, insurance is current, we are deemed to issue them a permit. We cannot deny them just because I'm mad at it. You know, I can't.
We used to be able to.
Whatever they've done has got to come here. This board can do that, you know, but as a building official, I cannot do that.
Okay. Anything else before we adjourn?
I would just, me personally, I would just second what, times are changing. And if it's not in black and white, just follow and take the emotions out of it. It's just business, like, it's a different day at a time, for sure. Being a younger contractor, I mean, they try to get away with everything, and until somebody stops them or does something else, I mean, it's just crazy out there. And I would say yes, I mean, talking for myself, use the board to the best of your ability. I mean, I asked to be on it to be active, so that's what we gotta do. I mean,
And we would offer to the individual that we tell him no, that he could appeal here.
Yeah.
And he could come plead his case to you. Here's my experience, here's what I got, here's what I gave them. And if you guys say, oh, no, this is great, then we're good.
So you're gonna check with county lawyer to see if an item 7, finding of fact or appeal can be added?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and we can bring that forward at the next meeting.
All right. Anything else you want to bring it up? Are we gonna? All right, then we are adjourned. We'll go to the house.